I got this starter set of Lannister miniatures from the Song of Ice and Fire miniature game. I do intend to play the game eventually, but I primarily wanted to paint some more medieval style miniatures. I've honestly always preferred fantasy settings compared to sci-fi ones, and this probably comes from a lot of Tolkien influence from when I was younger. I remember my dad taking me to see the movies and showing me his old editions of the Lord of the Rings books and being so enamored with them. I consider Age of Sigmar to be the premium fantasy miniature game at this point in time. I do enjoy Age of Sigmar, but I have had a hard time finding an army that I really identify with. The aesthetic of the game has changed a lot from traditional fantasy settings, and my favorite army, the Beastmen, has gone unloved for quite some time. So I wanted to paint some medieval looking knights, and I felt that this game was probably the best way for me to accomplish that. And I'm a fan of Game of Thrones. I actually really like the setting and the story and the grittiness of it. And I find the Lannisters to be a particularly interesting antagonist, and I felt them to be the most compelling army to paint for me. Now, of course, I do want to play the game in the future, and I understand that the Lannisters are actually pretty bad competitively, but this is primarily going to be a painting project for me, so I'm not too concerned with that. So when it comes to painting Lannisters, you're going to be painting a lot of red. And I thought that that would make a compelling video, because red can be a tricky color to paint effectively, actually. And so over the course of this video, we're going to discuss how to paint red effectively. So come along with me on this journey. You see, red is a bit of a unique paint. Commonly, with most colors, we start with a dark shadow, we highlight into a midtone, and then move to our brightest highlight. The color profile can change a lot as you lighten your color. And for red, this color tone can change quite a bit actually. If you're not careful, it can shift entirely to pink or orange, and if that's not what you're going for, then that can be quite a problem. Now, last I checked, Lannisters don't wear a lot of pink or orange. They wear a much more regal looking red, and so that's what I want to accomplish on this miniature. So we want to start extremely dark, nearly black honestly. I would start with a black base coat and then move to a very, very dark black, almost red as you get a little brighter. I specifically moved from black into a German gray and Mephiston red base coat. Now this had a bit of a purple hue to it that I wasn't crazy about, so I ended up adding a lot more Mephiston red as I put the layers on to kind of bring it back into a red tone. So the key aspect when it comes to painting a regal red that really reads as red and not as orange or pink is that our brightest highlight is not going to be brought that bright. Instead, our brightest highlight will be more of a mid-tone naturally, and this will help us avoid that change of color tone to a pink or orange. You see, when you add a color like white to your red, it instantly starts to turn pink, and that's what we're trying to avoid here. So instead of mixing in white, I'm actually going to take a brighter red and start to mix that into with my Mephiston red. In this case, I'm using Antares red from scale 75. We want to make sure our layers are thin and that we're making our highlights very gradual so that we maintain the color tone of red and stay away from those orange and pinks that we don't want. It's extremely important to maintain that the darkest folds are nearly black. This contrast between really, really dark, almost black shadows and the midtone that we utilize for the highlights will make those highlights stand a lot brighter without affecting the color tone. Our goal here is to kind of play a trick when you look at it. So in most miniatures, like I explained before, we tend to take them to an extremely bright highlight, utilizing white or off-white or gray or something like that to really brighten the tone of the miniature. But in this case, we don't want to do that obviously because we want to maintain that red color profile. So the way we do this is by keeping the shadows extremely dark. We want them nearly black because this will contrast greatly with the brighter red. And since we're only utilizing red at a more of a mid-tone layer, it'll make it appear brighter because the shadows are so much darker. I want to touch on the metallics for this miniature next. If you watched my most recent video talking about my must-have paints, I explained in there that I enjoyed the metallic paints I had, but that I was looking to upgrade and find better paints. I picked up the AK Interactive Metallics set, and I must say that these paints are great. They go on super smooth, they have great coverage. I only had to do one coat of each layer metallics I used, and overall I was just really impressed with these AK Interactive metallics, and I would definitely recommend picking up a set for your set. I think when it comes to painting metallics, it can be really tempting to just slap on a gunmetal, throw some known oil on there, and then just do a silver edge highlight. But for this, I tried to be a little bit more selective. I did do a gunmetal base tone with a known oil shade, but then I went in with the more silver paints, and I tried to be a lot more selective of where I put them. I tried to think about where the light would be hitting, and I just overall tried to be much more deliberate with where I was putting my highlights on the metallic to give it a much more realistic effect. I think TMMs get a bad rap when it comes to painting higher end miniatures, and that NMM has to be the way you go. But personally, I much prefer TMMs and have never had good experiences with NMM up to this point. And I think if you utilize your TMMs in a more deliberate way and think about where highlights should be instead of just edge highlighting everything, you can really elevate how they look. Overall, I'm really happy with how the miniature came out. I think I kind of figured out my method as I went along on the miniature, as the bottom cloak on the back looks a little messy, but as I proceeded into the miniature, I got a lot more cleaner with my layers, and I'm really happy with it came out. I think it accomplishes the effect I want. I don't think the color tone has changed into a pink or orange or anything like that, and I think I accomplished this by not highlighting with anything other than red paints and not going too bright, and instead utilizing those dark shadows to really add that contrast into the miniature and make the paint really stand out, and make those midtones really stand out, and make the cloth really look like it has a lot of depth, and that the folds are, folds in the cloth look really realistic and real, and adds just a lot of depth to the miniature. If you're interested in maybe learning how to paint green more effectively to look a little better, then check out my painting orc skin video if you want to kind of elevate how your orc skin looks and make it stand out amongst the others. Of course, don't forget to like this video, share it with your buddies, and go ahead and hit the subscribe button. We're growing fast, and I really appreciate all the support, so keep it up. I really appreciate it. Let me know what you think of this paint job down in the comments below, and maybe add what successful methods you've utilized to paint red effectively. I'd love to hear it, and maybe I can learn, and other people down in the comment section can learn a little bit too. So really appreciate all the support, and of course, as always, remember, a Lannister always pays his debts. Nah, I'm just kidding. Don't forget to elevate your game night.